Hello, in this lesson we will be taking a look at the Lambda keyword, the local and global scope for the variables, and function recursion. Okay, now let's see how we define a Lambda function. So let's say we want to call this print name equals Lambda name print and then print the name. And here we can just call the function print name with the name Bob. And if we go ahead and run this, you can see that Bob is printed here. Okay, so on the left side of the column, you can see the arguments that we pass for our function. And on the right side, you can see what the code does with this argument. We can also define a Lambda function with multiple arguments. So let's see what that would look. Sum equals lambda x comma y colon x plus y. And now we can print the sum of 5 and 6. Okay, and you see that here we have 11. So these are returned, you can say. This addition here is returned to the sum. And what you can do, just like with regular functions, you can also set the default values. So let's say that this by default is equal to 6. Then we can print the sum of just 5. Okay, so it takes in 5 for x, and because we didn't specify a value for y, it's just going to use the default value. I can also print sum of 4 and 4, and now because I specified a value for the y argument, it's going to replace the default 6 with the provided 4. So 4 plus 4 equals 8, just like with regular functions. Okay, now let's see how we can use the if statement in our Lambda functions. So let's say this is the small number, lambda x and y as arguments, and now we can do x if x is less than y, else y, and then we can just print a small number. We can use 4 and 5 here, and you can see that the smallest number is 4, so it prints 4. So how does this work? Is we print x if x is less than y, otherwise we print y, and because x 4 is less than y, which is 5, we print x. Now if I just say 10 and 8, now the second number, the y value, is less than the x, so it's going to print 8, the y value. Now let's talk a bit about scope of the variables. So scope dictates which parts of our program can use a certain variable. So there are two types, the global scope and the local scope. So for the local scope, variables that are defined inside the function are called local variables, and these are only accessible within the function. Now variables that are defined outside of the function are called global variables, and any part of our program can have access to them. Now let's see an example of the two different scopes now. Now let's create a global variable sum, which will be set to 0. Now let's define an addition function that takes in a and b as arguments. Now the sum is equal to a plus b. Then we want to print local variable result of sum, and then we can print sum. We can also then return sum. Okay, now let's do add a actually 5 and 6, and let's see what happens now. Okay, so it says local variable result of sum is 11. Now if I go ahead and also print here checking global variable result of a sum, and then I can just print sum here, you can see that the global variable result of sum is 0, because this global variable hasn't changed. This here sum is a different variable. This is a local variable that is defined within the function and only exists within the function. As soon as the function ends, as soon as the function is executed, it stops existing. So the one that we print here is the one that we use in the local scope, and the one that we print here is this global one. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Let's say this global variable equals to hello, I am global. Okay, now let's define the print variable function without any arguments. Now the local variable here, actually var, is set to hello, I am local. Now we can print global variable. We can also print local variable. Okay, now let's call this function. So print variable, and let's see what happens. Okay, so we print hello, I'm global, and we print hello, I am local, which is pretty much what we expected. But now let's try to print these outside of the function. So let's print global variable, and let's also print local variable, local var. Okay, so as you can see, we get an error, and the reason why is because this variable here is not accessible outside of the function, because it has a local scope. So because we can't find the variable, it says unresolved reference local variable, we can't find the variable anywhere that we can use, so we just get an error back. And as you can see here, it says name local variable is not defined. And keep in mind, you can't directly modify a global variable inside of a function unless you can use it as an argument when you are defining the function, or if you use the global keyword before the variable. So let's take a look at an example of that. Okay, so let's define another global variable, hello, I am Sam. Now let's define change global variable without any parameters. So now global variable equals to hello. Actually, you need to just type that so the function knows that you are referring to this global variable. And now you can just type global variable equals hello, I am Bob. Okay, now we can call this function change global variable, and then we can print the global variable, and as you can see, it says hello, I am Bob, which is different from the original one. Now if we didn't use this keyword, if we didn't say global variable, what would happen is it would say hello, I am Sam, because this here is another variable that is created within the function and it has a local scope, so it stops existing when the function is over. Okay, so let's take a look at some exercises you could do to practice. Create a lambda function to find the cube of a given number. So let's say I input 3 as a parameter. We have to calculate 3 times 3 times 3, which is the cube of the number. And then create a lambda function to find the greater number between two different numbers. I believe we did something very similar, if not exactly the same as this one. So we're getting into more complicated concepts, so that requires more practice and more exercises. So try to keep up with the different things that you're learning, and make sure you practice everything enough. Thank you, everyone.